Assalamu alaikum. This is Sabia Afroz, lecturer, Department of English, Government Bangabandhu College, Gopalganj. Dear students and viewers, welcome to my online class again. I hope you are well and safe by the grace of Almighty. Dear students, today our class is for the students of Honours, Second Year, Department of English. Today our subject is History of English Literature, and the subject code of this subject is 221107. Dear students, you know there are many ages in English literature. The Anglo-Saxon age, the age of Chaucer, the Reformation age, the Renaissance age, the Restoration age, Neoclassical age, the Romantic age, Victorian age, and the Modern age. Today we shall discuss the definition of Romanticism, the beginning and the duration of Romantic age, some important or famous Romantic poets, and the characteristics of Romantic age. At first, we should know the definition of Romanticism. Dear students, Romanticism is a literary movement in English literature. Actually, this literary movement was against the rigid or uncompromising rules of the neoclassical age. Romanticism is also called a trend to return to nature. Dear students, Romanticism is also called the second Renaissance in English literature because the writers of Romanticism followed the writers of the Renaissance age. Now we shall discuss the duration and beginning of the Romantic age. Dear students, Romantic age is one of the most important ages in English literature. In English literature, Romantic age begins in 1798, and this age began with the publications of the lyrical ballads. Now the question is, what is lyrical ballads? Actually, lyrical ballads is a collection of poems by William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Dear students, this is the duration of Romantic age. The duration of Romantic age is from 1798 to 1832. William Blake is called the precursor of Romanticism or the Romantic age, and William Wordsworth is called the pioneer of the Romantic age. Now we shall discuss some important poets of this age or the Romantic age. Dear students, these are the some important poets of the Romantic age. Number 1, William Wordsworth. Number 2, Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Number 3, P.B. Shelley or Percy B.C. Shelley. Number 4, John Keats. And number 5, Lord Byron. Now we shall discuss their contribution to English literature. Number 1, William Wordsworth. Dear students, William Wordsworth is the most famous Romantic poet. Wordsworth is called the poet of nature, and he wrote many famous poems in English literature. His famous poems are I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud, The Prelude, Ode, Intimations of Immortality, Tintern Abbey, and In a Beauteous Evening, Calm and Free. His Lucy poems are also important in English literature. Dear students, in the poem I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud or Daffodils, the other name of the poem is Daffodils. And in the poem Daffodils, we find the healing influence of nature. I have mentioned already that Wordsworth is called the poet of nature, and in this poem Wordsworth told us about the healing influence of nature. In the poem Intimations of Immortality, Wordsworth told us, or Wordsworth has said about the pre-existence of the human soul. And Wordsworth's very famous poem is Tintern Abbey. The full title of this poem is Lines Composed a Few Miles Above Tintern Abbey, on revisiting the banks of the river Ouse. In the poem Tintern Abbey, Wordsworth has told us about the 4 stages of the development of human soul. And in the first stage, we find the animal pleasure. In the second stage, we find the sensual pleasure. In the third stage, we find the humanity. And in the fourth stage of Tintern Abbey, we find pantheism. Dear students, Wordsworth believed in pantheism, and it is an important term in English literature. Now we should know what is pantheism. Dear students, pantheism is a belief that God exists in everything, or nature is God. God exists in nature, or nature is God, and this belief is called pantheism. So we can say that William Wordsworth is one of the most important poets of the Romantic age. Number 2, S.T. Coleridge or Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Dear students, S.T. Coleridge is called the poet of supernatural elements in English literature. Coleridge is also called a dream poet because Coleridge is called the poet of supernatural because we find supernatural elements in his poems. Coleridge's famous poems are Christabel, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, Kubla Khan, etc. In the poem The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, we find many supernatural elements. The supernatural elements, those we find in the poem The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, are the death of the 200 sailors and unnatural death of the 200 sailors, voice of justice, voice of mercy, the dangerous or unnatural woman, etc. His famous poem Kubla Khan is also a supernatural poem, and this poem is also called a dream poem. So we can say that S.T. Coleridge or Samuel Taylor Coleridge is one of the important poets of the Romantic age. And number 3, P.B. Shelley. Percy Bysshe Shelley. Dear students, you should memorize the spelling Samuel Taylor Coleridge and Percy Bysshe Shelley. P.B. Shelley or Percy Bysshe Shelley is another famous poet of English literature, and his famous poems are Ode to the West Wind, Adonais, To a Skylark, etc. Dear students, P.B. Shelley is called the revolutionary poet of the Romantic age because we find revolutionary spirit in Shelley's poems. If we analyze his poems, we find that he is correctly said the revolutionary poet in English literature. We can quote some lines from his poems. We can quote some lines from the poem Ode to the West Wind, such as, "Oh, lift me as a wave, a cloud. I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed. Oh, lift me as a cloud, as a wave. I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed." And the last 2 lines of this poem are, "The trumpet of a prophecy, O wind, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? And his poem To a Skylark is also a very famous poem in English literature. And in this poem we also find some memorable lines of English literature. I can quote some lines from the poem To a Skylark. We look before and after. We means human beings. We look before and after and pine for what is not. Our sincerest laughter with some pain is fraught, and our sweetest songs are those that tell of saddest thought. Dear students, undoubtedly these lines are very famous lines in English literature. So we can say that Percy Bysshe Shelley is one of the most important poets of Romantic age. And number 4, John Keats. John Keats is called the poet of beauty because he worshipped beauty so much. Dear students, John Keats's famous poems are Ode to Autumn, Ode to a Nightingale, Ode on a Grecian Urn, Ode on Melancholy, etc. Hyperion is also a famous poem by John Keats. Dear students, Keats is perfectly called the poet of beauty. We can quote some lines from his poem Ode on a Grecian Urn. Beauty is truth, truth beauty, that is all. They know on earth and all they need to know. Beauty is truth, truth beauty, that is all they know on earth and all they need to know. So, dear students, John Keats is perfectly called the poet of beauty of the Romantic age. And at last, number 5, Lord Byron. Lord Byron is another important poet of the Romantic age, and his famous poem is Don Juan. So, dear students, we have discussed the contribution of these famous poets of English literature or the Romantic age. Now, we are going to discuss the characteristics of the Romantic age or the characteristics of Romanticism. Dear students, these are the characteristics of romanticism or the romantic age. Number 1, subjectivity. Number 2, spontaneity. Number 3, love for nature. Number 4, love for supernatural. Number 5, love for beauty. Number 6, melancholy. Number 7, democratic note. And number 8, a revolt against the artificiality of the neoclassical age. Now we shall discuss these characteristics of romanticism. Number 1, subjectivity. Dear students, subjectivity is one of the most important characteristics of the romantic age. All romantic poems are subjective because the romantic poets or the writers expressed their personal feelings and emotions in their poems. For example, we can say in the poem I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud, the first line is I wandered lonely as a cloud, and here I means the poet himself. I indicates the poet himself. So we can say that subjectivity is one of the most important characteristics of the romantic age. And number 2, spontaneity. Dear students, spontaneity is another important characteristic of the romantic age or romanticism. Wordsworth, the pioneer of the romantic age or romanticism, defined poetry as the spontaneous overflow. Wordsworth has said that poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. So, dear students, we can say that all romantic poems are spontaneous, and these poems are the spontaneous expressions of the poets. So we can say that spontaneity is the important characteristic of romantic age. And number 3, love for nature. Dear students, the romantic poets or the writers had deep love for nature, and all of them dealt with nature. All the romantic poets took nature as their subject matter. Wordsworth, Coleridge, Shelley, John Keats, all poets showed their love for nature. So we can say that love for nature is one of the most important characteristics of romanticism. And number 4, love for supernatural. Dear students, love for supernatural elements is another characteristic of romanticism. The romantic writers had a soft corner for the remote things, or the unnatural things. So, supernatural elements are important characteristics of their poetry. And number 5, love for beauty. Dear students, love for beauty is another important characteristic of romanticism because all the romantic writers worshipped beauty. They presented beauty in their poems. So we can say love for beauty is important characteristic of romanticism. And number 7, melancholy. Dear students, the romantic poets or the writers were dissatisfied persons. They were dissatisfied with their circumstances, with their surroundings, with their personal life, or anything else, and for this reason they were depressed, and this depression has been presented in their poems. So melancholy is one of the most important characteristics of their poems. Number 7, democratic note. Dear students, French Revolution took place in 1789 and Romantic age began in 1798. Romantic age was influenced by the French Revolution. We should mind it that Romantic age was influenced by the French Revolution, and the main slogans of French Revolution were liberty, equality and fraternity. So we find a democratic note, we find a note of equality in the poems of the Romantic poets. We can say that democratic note is one of the most important elements of the Romantic age. And at last, number 8, Romanticism was a revolt against the artificiality of the neoclassical age. You know, dear students, in English literature, Romantic age comes after neoclassical age, and neoclassical age was full of artificiality, and neoclassical age represented human nature, and their subject matter was not nature. They were not emotional. They used intellect in their writings. But Romantic poetry is emotional feelings of the writers or the poets. For this reason, we can say that Romantic age is a revolt against the artificiality of the neoclassical age. Dear students, we have discussed the definition of Romanticism, the duration of Romantic age, some important Romantic poets, and the characteristics of Romanticism. And that's all for the moment. Thank you.